Whispers in the shadows. At Mercy General Hospital, the fluorescent lights sputtered, casting elongated shadows across the pristine hallway. Nurse Rachel Torres, with slightly trembling hands, adjusted her uniform as she guided the medication cart. An unusual sensation permeated the air tonight, a heavy, stifling silence. Despite 7 years of night shifts, Rachel was unprepared for the events that would transpire during her upcoming 12-hour stint. At 32, she was regarded by her peers as the most composed nurse in the oncology ward, logical, serene, and steadfast. The clock chimed midnight, and an uncanny quietness enveloped the ward. Most patients were in slumber, their steady breathing the sole sound breaking the stillness. Rachel hesitated near room 314, her gaze captured by the ajar door. A shiver coursed down her spine. Something was amiss. Mr. Gerald Thompson, a 68-year-old with terminal cancer, lay still in his bed, his skin appearing nearly diaphanous in the faint light, veins resembling intricate blue-gray cartography beneath his delicate skin. Rachel had served as his primary nurse for the last month, observing his decline daily. As she moved to assess his vitals, a whisper, gentle yet distinct, arose from the room's corner. "Don't touch him." The voice was neither male nor female, residing somewhere between a breath and a thought. Rachel halted, her logical mind searching for explanations. Exhaustion, imagination, the strain of prolonged shifts. Yet the whisper felt substantial, almost physical. "Who's there?" she inquired, her professional composure momentarily fractured. Silence met her query. Mr. Thompson's eyes suddenly opened, lacking their usual warmth. They seemed to peer through Rachel, fixating on something beyond the physical realm. His lips moved, but no sound escaped. The medical devices around his bed began to sputter, the heart monitor's green line fluctuating, the IV pump's digital display blinking irregularly. Rachel's training engaged. She neared the patient, reaching for his wrist to check his pulse. The instant her fingers contacted his skin, a frigid energy surged through her. Fragments of images, a dark hallway, whispered dialogues, faces twisted in inexplicable torment, flashed through her mind. "They're coming," Mr. Thompson suddenly rasped. "They've always been here." Before Rachel could react, the surrounding equipment silenced. The heart monitor flatlined, the IV pump ceased, and the room was submerged in an unnatural darkness. When the lights were restored moments later, Mr. Thompson lay completely still, his eyes now closed, appearing peaceful. But Rachel sensed a profound change. She reached for her phone to alert the charge nurse, her hand trembling as she dialed. A singular thought echoed in her mind. This was merely the prelude. The hospital's night shift had always revolved around life and death, but tonight, Rachel understood there might be something else lurking between these states. Something beyond medical comprehension. Little did she realize the events of this night would challenge her beliefs about medicine, reality, and the delicate veil separating the living world from something far more enigmatic. As dawn approached, casting its first pale light through the hospital windows, Rachel Torres would learn that some encounters transcend science, logic, or rational thought. Some narratives reside in the shadows, awaiting discovery. The midnight ward doctor, Elena Rodriguez, stood at the nurse's station, her fingers tracing the perimeter of Marcus Holloway's medical file. The young patient in room 417 had been a medical enigma since his admission 3 weeks prior. Unexplained symptoms, peculiar test results, a condition that defied all diagnostic protocols. Marcus, 25, athletic and previously robust, had been admitted after collapsing during a morning run, exhibiting symptoms that confounded the entire medical team. His body appeared to be battling an unidentified invader, with temperatures spiking erratically and bizarre cellular mutations that defied microscopic analysis. The night shift was invariably the most demanding. Shadows seemed to lengthen, and sounds became more pronounced. Alina had served at Mercy General for over a decade, but Marcus's case disturbed her more than any she had previously encountered. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the initial anomaly manifested. The lights in Marcus's room began to flicker, not in the typical electrical malfunction pattern, but in a rhythmic, almost intentional sequence. Pulse, pause, pulse. Alina observed through the glass partition, her scientific mind striving to rationalize the pattern. Marcus lay inert, his body enveloped in an unusual network of dark veins that seemed to undulate beneath his skin. During prior examinations, these veins had appeared and vanished, defying medical rationale. Blood tests revealed impossible variations, cellular structures that altered composition between draws. Nurse Derek Williams approached. Alina, his usually confident gait hesitant. "Doctor, you need to see this," he murmured, gesturing toward the patient monitor. The readings were illogical. Vital signs fluctuated wildly, heart rate plummeting to near zero, then surging to levels that should have induced immediate cardiac arrest. Yet Marcus remained still, his breathing consistent. "Something's trying to communicate," Marcus suddenly uttered, his eyes still closed. Alina froze. They had sedated Marcus hours earlier. He should have been deeply unconscious. "The space between," Marcus continued, his voice imbued with an unnatural resonance, "is not empty. It's waiting." Derek recoiled, his professional composure faltering. The room's temperature plunged. Medical instruments began to vibrate subtly, a low hum emanating from deep within the walls. Alina's medical training clashed with an emerging sense of something beyond scientific explanation. Marcus's body began to metamorphose. The dark veins beneath his skin started to shift, forming intricate patterns resembling complex neural networks, but not human. Something alien. "They're coming," Marcus whispered, his eyes now open but unfocused. "The barrier is thin tonight." Suddenly, the hospital's backup generators activated. For a fleeting second, darkness engulfed the ward. When light was restored, Marcus's bed was vacant. No trace of the patient remained, no indentation on the sheets, no indication he had ever been there. Alina's medical badge affixed to her coat began to emit a low, metallic vibration. The digital display flickered between timestamps and a series of incomprehensible symbols. Derek's hand reached for the emergency alarm, but something restrained him, a presence, invisible yet palpable. "We're not alone," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. The hospital's night persisted, but something fundamental had altered. The boundary between medical science and something entirely unknown had been irrevocably blurred. As dawn neared, Alina Rodriguez would realize that some medical mysteries transcend textbooks, research, or years of professional experience. Some encounters reside beyond the realm of human understanding, waiting, observing, preparing to breach the confines of what we deem possible. The midnight ward held its breath, safeguarding its secrets. Echoes of the past. The archive medical wing of Mercy General Hospital resembled a forgotten time capsule. Dusty file cabinets lined the walls, their metal exteriors tarnished by decades of neglect. Dr. Victor Ramirez, the hospital's chief archivist, had dedicated years to cataloging historical medical records, yet nothing could have prepared him for his discovery on this particular night. It commenced with a manila folder concealed deep within the archives' recesses. The file was peculiar, its edges scorched, the paper yellowed and brittle. Victor's hands trembled slightly as he meticulously opened the document, cautious not to damage the delicate pages. The case file dated back to 1967, nearly 6 decades prior. It chronicled a series of unexplained patient disappearances and peculiar medical anomalies that had transpired in the hospital's experimental ward. Names were redacted, medical notes cryptic and fragmentary. As Victor perused the file, a chill coursed up his spine. The symptoms depicted in the old file bore an eerie similarity to the recent cases of Marcus Holloway and the oncology ward patient: cellular mutations, unexplained energy signatures, patients who seemed to exist between states of being. A loud thud reverberated through the archives, disrupting his concentration. Victor looked up, his breath catching in his throat. The rows of filing cabinets seemed to stretch endlessly, shadows oscillating between the metal structures. "Hello?" He called out, his voice echoing in the vacant space. Silence replied, followed by a whisper, soft initially, then escalating in intensity. Fragments of medical terminology, patient names, and dates coalesced in a disconcerting cacophony. The file in Victor's hands began to morph. The ink seemed to shift, rearranging itself into patterns that defied logical interpretation. Medical diagrams transfigured, displaying anatomical structures that were neither human nor recognizable by any scientific criterion. A photograph slipped from between the pages, black and white, slightly blurred. It depicted a group of doctors standing outside the hospital in 1967. Their faces were partially obscured, but one figure stood out, a tall, gaunt doctor whose eyes seemed to peer directly through the photograph, directly at Victor. The lights in the archive room began to flicker. Medical instruments stored in glass cases started to vibrate, their metallic surfaces humming with an unnatural energy. Victor's research had always centered on preserving medical history, but now he understood he was on the cusp of something far more significant, a mystery that had been meticulously concealed for decades. The redacted. Sections of the file seemed to blur, then slowly become legible. Fragments of text surfaced. Experimental treatment. Boundary between states. Not human. Something else entirely. A loud crash shattered the silence. One of the filing cabinets had toppled, its drawers spilling hundreds of old patient records across the floor. As Victor knelt to gather the scattered papers, he noticed something impossible. The records seemed to be moving slightly, imperceptibly, as if alive. The hospital's concealed history was striving to reveal itself, and Victor Ramirez was poised to become the reluctant messenger of a truth that had been interred for generations. As the night progressed, the boundary between medical record and living history blurred. Something was awakening, something that had been awaiting discovery. The archives held their breath, custodians of a secret that would soon escape its meticulously maintained confinement. The Forgotten Wing. Nurse Olivia Bennett had been employed at Mercy General for 15 years, yet she had never ventured into the hospital's West Wing, the section that had been sealed off decades prior. The massive steel door, concealed behind layers of institutional beige paint and medical supply cabinets, had always been merely a rumor among the staff. Until tonight. Her inquiry began innocently enough. The recent peculiar occurrences, Marcus Holloway's unexplained disappearance, the archived medical records that seemed to possess a life of their own, the whispers from patient rooms, had propelled her beyond professional curiosity. Victor Ramirez's research had provided her with a key, an old, tarnished key concealed within a file from 1967, its intricate design suggesting it was more than a mere door lock. The West Wing's entrance was precisely where the archive documents indicated, behind a false wall in the hospital's maintenance corridor. As Olivia inserted the key, the lock yielded with surprising ease, almost as if the door had been anticipating its opening. Dust billowed as the heavy door creaked open. The air felt distinct, thick, oppressive, imbued with an energy that made the hair on her arms rise. Medical equipment from a bygone era lined the corridor, outdated ventilators, archaic monitoring systems, examination tables with leather straps that resembled restraints. Photographs adorned the walls, patient portraits from decades past. But something was amiss with the images. The patient's eyes seemed to track her, their expressions a blend of suffering and something else. Something almost knowing. A sound captured her attention, a rhythmic tapping emanating from the corridor's end. Tap, tap, tap. Olivia's medical training clashed with a burgeoning sense of trepidation, professional inquisitiveness warring with an instinctive urge to flee. The tapping intensified. At the corridor's end, a room stood with its door slightly ajar. Medical charts were strewn across the floor, their pages filled with diagrams and notes that seemed to pulsate with an unnatural vitality. The handwriting altered mid-page, transitioning from precise medical notation to something resembling a language no human had ever encountered. A medical trolley stood in the room's center. Strapped to it was a figure, neither entirely human nor completely something else. Wires and medical tubes connected the figure to a series of machines that hummed with an otherworldly frequency. The figure turned its head, its eyes iridescent, shifting between multiple hues, locking directly onto Olivia. "We've been waiting," the figure articulated, its voice a fusion of multiple tones. "The barrier is breaking." Olivia's communication device, her hospital-issued radio, began to emit an unusual signal, fragments of conversations, medical terminology, and something that sounded like a language between static and thought. The room's temperature plummeted. The medical equipment began to vibrate, their digital displays flickering between patient data and sequences of symbols that defied comprehension. Something was endeavoring to communicate, something that had been confined, studied, concealed for decades. The West Wing was more than a neglected section of the hospital. It was a portal, a threshold between what humanity comprehended and what existed beyond those constrained perceptions. And now that threshold was poised to be breached. Olivia Bennett understood she was no longer merely an observer. She had become part of something far grander than any medical mystery she could have envisioned. The hospital's profoundest secret was awakening, and nothing would ever be the same. Beyond medical understanding, the convergence transpired at dawn. Dr. Alina Rodriguez, Nurse Rachel Torres, Victor Ramirez, and Olivia Bennett found themselves inexplicably drawn to the hospital's restricted West Wing. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting fragmented shadows that seemed to possess a life of their own. The figure from the medical trolley, no longer restrained, no longer confined, stood at the corridor's center. Its form oscillated between human and something entirely otherworldly, a living testament to the limits of medical science and something far more profound. "You've been gathering the fragments," the entity declared, its voice a symphony of multiple frequencies, pieces of a narrative that was never intended to be fully comprehended. Victor's archived documents, Rachel's patient encounters, Alina's inexplicable medical cases, Olivia's revelation of the hidden wing. They were not coincidences, they were meticulously orchestrated disclosures. The hospital walls began to respire, not metaphorically, but literally. The very structure seemed animate, pulsating with an energy that defied conventional physics. Medical equipment throughout the building activated, monitors displaying impossible data streams, IV machines dispensing their contents in synchronized rhythms. "We are not an incursion," the entity clarified. "We are a preservation, a bridge between your comprehension and what exists beyond your perception." Fragments of memory inundated their minds, patients who had vanished, unexplained medical phenomena, the delicate veil between life, death, and something else entirely. The entity unveiled the truth. For decades, Mercy General had been a focal point, a location where dimensional boundaries were at their thinnest. The hospital was more than a medical facility. It was a monitoring station, an observation point for entities scrutinizing human existence. Marcus Holloway, the patient who had disappeared, was not a victim. He was a herald, a bridge between realms. The cellular mutations, the peculiar symptoms, they were not ailments but metamorphoses. "Humanity stands at a threshold," the entity continued. "Your comprehension of existence is poised to expand." The West Wing transfigured, medical equipment amalgamated with technologies beyond human comprehension. The walls became diaphanous, revealing strata of reality that had always existed but remained imperceptible. Rachel, Alina, Victor, and Olivia discerned that they were not merely witnesses. They had been chosen, selected to comprehend and potentially bridge the chasm between human perception and a broader, more intricate reality. As dawn unfurled, the hospital reverted to normalcy. To any external observer, nothing had altered. But for those who had undergone the night's events, everything was different. Medical records would be archived, patients would be treated. But beneath the sterile veneer, something fundamental had shifted. The boundary had been probed, and humanity was on the verge of entering a novel phase of understanding. Mercy General Hospital safeguarded its secrets, for now.